In 1946, President Truman made Denmark a secret offer, $100 million in solid gold for the world's largest island. Denmark said no, and that offer? It stayed classified for 45 years. Now, why would you classify a real estate negotiation for nearly half a century? But that's not the only secret buried in Greenland. In January 1968, a B-52 bomber crashed near America's Arctic base. On board, 4 hydrogen bombs, each one 70 times more powerful than Hiroshima. The Pentagon says they recovered all of them. Evidence suggests one is still there, frozen under the ice. Fast forward to today. The President of the United States says military force is on the table to take Greenland. He told the New York Times, and I'm quoting here, "I don't need international law." Denmark, a NATO ally we've been partners with for 75 years, has designated America a potential security threat, for the first time in history. So what is hidden under that ice that's worth risking everything? The answer isn't one thing, it's 3. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why whoever controls Greenland may control the 21st century. You'll see the minerals that China already controls, the ones your phone, your car, and every American fighter jet can't exist without. You'll see the military position that no amount of money can replicate anywhere else on Earth. And you'll see what 56,000 Greenlanders just decided about their own future, and why America might already be losing. For 160 years, every generation of American leadership has tried to secure this island. They weren't being irrational, they knew something. Actually, they knew 3 things. Let's start with what's under the ice. Let's go back to 1867. Secretary of State William Seward had just purchased Alaska from Russia for $7.2 million. The newspapers mocked him, called it Seward's folly, a frozen wasteland, a colossal waste of money. But here's what the newspapers didn't know. Immediately after the Alaska deal closed, Seward commissioned a secret report. The subject? How to acquire Greenland and Iceland. He saw the Arctic as America's strategic frontier, 160 years before anyone else did. So was Alaska really a folly? Or did Seward see something the rest of the world would take over a century to understand? Fast forward to 1946. World War II just ended. The Cold War is beginning, and America had occupied Greenland since 1941 to keep it out of Nazi hands. Secretary of State James Burns makes Denmark an offer. $100 million in gold, or, and this is the interesting part, a land swap. Give us Greenland and we'll give you Point Barrow, Alaska. Denmark's Foreign Minister, Gustav Rasmussen, responds, "While we owe much to America, I do not feel that we owe them the whole island." Now here's the kicker. Point Barrow, Alaska? That would have included the Prudhoe Bay oil field, the largest in North America. Denmark said no to that, and this entire negotiation stayed classified until 1991. 45 years of secrecy for a real estate deal that didn't happen. Unless it wasn't just about real estate. In 1959, the US Army built something in Greenland that sounds like science fiction. Camp Century, a city under the ice. 21 tunnels, 3 kilometers total, 28 feet below the ice surface. 200 men living in an underground complex powered by the world's first portable nuclear reactor. The official purpose? Arctic research. The actual purpose? Project Iceworm, a top-secret plan to build 4,000 kilometers of tunnels housing up to 600 nuclear missiles. Missiles that could be relocated via underground rail cars, making them nearly impossible for the Soviets to target. The planned network would have covered 52,000 square miles. That's 3 times the size of Denmark itself. And Denmark was never told. The project was cancelled in 1966. The ice moves, the tunnels deformed and collapsed. It stayed classified until 1997. But here's what's still there. 200,000 litres of diesel fuel, 240,000 litres of wastewater, PCBs, and 47,000 gallons of radioactive coolant from that nuclear reactor. All of it frozen in the ice. Climate scientists estimate the melting ice sheet could expose this waste by 2090. America's secret Arctic base is becoming a ticking environmental time bomb.
January 21st, 1968.
A B-52G bomber is flying near America's Arctic base. On board, 4 B-28Fi thermonuclear bombs, each one with a 1.45 megaton yield, 70 times more powerful than Hiroshima. The fire started because crew members placed foam seat cushions over a heating vent. The bomber crashed on sea ice. The conventional explosives detonated. Plutonium scattered across 3 square miles. Cleanup crews worked in temperatures reaching -75 degrees Fahrenheit with 80-mile-per-hour winds. They removed 237,000 cubic feet of contaminated material. The Pentagon says all 4 weapons were recovered, but one bomb's secondary stage, the component that creates the thermonuclear explosion, was never found. Fragments remain buried in Bylot Sound sediment to this day. And the crash revealed something else. The US had been secretly flying nuclear-armed bombers over Denmark, a country that had declared itself a nuclear-free zone.
2019.
Trump floats buying Greenland. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen calls it absurd. Trump cancels his state visit, calls her nasty. December 2024. Trump wins again, posts that Greenland ownership is an absolute necessity. January 2025. His son visits Greenland as a tourist, while Trump holds a press conference refusing to rule out military force. January 2026. The White House confirms force is on the table. Trump tells the New York Times, "I don't need international law." For 160 years, every generation of American leadership has tried to secure Greenland. They weren't being irrational. They knew something. Actually, they knew 3 things. Let's start with what's under the ice. Here's the first thing every president knew. Greenland contains an estimated 1.5 million metric tons of confirmed rare earth reserves. That's the 8th largest in the world. But that's just what we can see. Including deposits still under the ice, the island may hold 36 to 42 million metric tons. That would make it the 2nd largest rare earth reserve on the planet, after China. A 2023 geological survey found 39 of the 50 minerals deemed critical to US national security, all present on this single island. The Tan Breeze deposit in southern Greenland may be the world's largest rare earth deposit. 28.2 million metric tons of rare earth oxides. And here's what matters. 27% heavy rare earth content. Heavy rare earths, dysprosium, terbium, these are the hardest to get, the most critical for defense, and China controls almost all of them. The deposit covers an area of 8 by 5 kilometers, 400 meters thick.
Now let me make this real for you.
A single Virginia-class submarine requires 4,600 kilograms of rare earth elements. That's over 10,000 pounds. The sonar system that hears enemy vessels miles away? Rare earths. The guidance systems for Tomahawk missiles? Rare earths. The electric motors that let it run silent? Rare earths. An F-35 fighter jet can't fly without them. Every electric vehicle, every wind turbine, the phone in your pocket right now, the MRI machine that might save your life someday. Without rare earths, none of it exists. So the question isn't whether these minerals matter. The question is, who controls them?
Here's the supply chain in 3 numbers.
China mines 70% of the world's rare earths. China refines 90% of them. America imports 70% of what it uses from China. Every path leads through Beijing. It doesn't matter who owns the mine. It doesn't matter who digs it out of the ground. If China controls the refining, and they do, they control the supply. Think of it like this. Imagine you grow the wheat, you harvest the wheat, you ship the wheat, But only one country in the world has flour mills. Whoever controls the mills controls the bread. China has the mills. October 2025. Beijing announced its most significant export restrictions yet. Case-by-case approval for any materials used in foreign defense systems. Do the math. The Bruegel think tank warns that up to 30% of Pentagon programs face potential delays from rare earth shortages. China doesn't need to fight a war. They don't need to fire a missile or send a soldier. They can just turn off the supply.
So what has China done about Greenland?
More than you'd think. 2016. China's state-owned Shenghe Resources acquires 12.5% of the company controlling the Kvanefjeld rare earth deposit. They signed agreements to potentially increase their stake to 60%, while leading all processing and marketing. 2019. Shenghe partners with China National Nuclear Corporation. That's a state nuclear weapons producer. 2018. China Communications Construction Company, state-owned, was shortlisted to build Greenland's airport network. A $550 million project, that's 17% of Greenland's entire GDP, and the proposed runway lengths? Long enough to accommodate military fighter jets. US Defense Secretary James Mattis personally urged Denmark to intervene. Denmark offered to co-finance the airports itself. China withdrew. 2016. A Hong Kong-linked company tried to buy Grønnedal, an abandoned Danish naval base. The Danish Prime Minister blocked the sale. Why? Proximity to America's Arctic base. 2021. Greenland reinstated its uranium mining ban. Because the Kvanefjeld deposit contains uranium alongside rare earths, the entire project was blocked. Over $100 million in Chinese and Australian investment, stranded. Greenland chose to sacrifice a massive economic opportunity rather than let the project proceed under Chinese influence.
The US finally responded.
June 2024. Critical Metals Corp., a New York-based company, acquired a 42% stake in the Tanbreeze project. The price? $5 million cash, plus $211 million in stock. US officials had extensively lobbied the Australian owner to reject higher Chinese offers. June 2025. The US Export-Import Bank offered a $120 million loan for Tanbreeze development, the Trump administration's first overseas mining investment. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Quote, "Ore does not equal security. Throughput does. Until the West builds non-Chinese processing at scale, new mines risk becoming symbolic victories that still end in Beijing's hands. Even if the US wins the mining rights, where does the ore get processed? China. But minerals are only the first layer. Underneath America's obsession is something even more valuable than rare earths: position.
Here's the second thing every president knew.
Pituffik Space Base, 750 miles north of the Arctic Circle, latitude 76 degrees north. The US Department of Defense's northernmost installation on Earth. Built in 1951 under Operation Blue Jay. Renamed from Thule Air Base in 2023, reflecting its new Space Force mission. The 12th Space Warning Squadron operates upgraded early warning radar from this base. They detect approximately 1,000 ballistic missile launches every year. The 23rd Space Operations Squadron conducts roughly 20,000 satellite contacts per year. They track 30% of all US orbital assets. And here's why this location is irreplaceable. Pituffik provides the shortest warning time for intercontinental ballistic missiles launched from Russia, as little as 10 to 25 minutes. Its position offers vantage points for polar orbit monitoring and Arctic airspace surveillance that simply cannot be replicated anywhere else on Earth. You can't build another Pituffik. Geography doesn't allow it. The US knows this. August 2024. $323 million power plant modernization. 2024. $1.73 billion dry dock expansion. 2017. $40 million radar upgrade. They're not leaving. But Pituffik isn't the only strategic asset. The GIUK gap. Greenland, Iceland, United Kingdom. Picture a hallway with a single door at the end. Behind the door is the Atlantic Ocean, where all of Europe's shipping lanes run, where undersea cables carry the internet, where the US Navy operates. In front of the door is Russia's submarine fleet, their northern fleet, based on the Kola Peninsula. That 200-mile gap between Greenland, Iceland, and the UK? That's the door. It's the only outlet Russian submarines have to reach the Atlantic from their home bases. The only door. During the Cold War, NATO lined that doorway with underwater microphones, the SOSUS system, listening for the sound of Soviet subs trying to slip through. Today, a former NATO deputy commander says Russian submarine activity in the region now equals or surpasses Cold War levels. They're testing the door again. October 2019, 10 Russian submarines, 8 of them nuclear-powered, deployed south of Iceland, the largest such exercise since the Cold War, testing whether they could slip through NATO's detection systems undetected. And Russia's modern Yasen-class attack submarines? They can strike NATO infrastructure with cruise missiles from the Norwegian and Barents Seas, without even entering the gap. By the way, over 95% of international internet traffic passes through undersea cables in this region. $10 trillion in daily financial transactions. The 2022 Nord Stream pipeline explosions. Multiple Baltic Sea cable cuts in 2024. This isn't just about submarines. It's about the cables that connect the global economy.
Now here's the problem. The US has the base, it has the surveillance, but it can barely even get there.
Let me give you the number that keeps Pentagon planners up at night. Russia, 40 icebreakers, including 8 nuclear-powered. United States, 3. Not 30 versus 20, not close, 40 to 3. And America's only heavy icebreaker, the Polar Star, is 49 years old, 19 years past its expected service life. How is it still running? By cannibalizing parts from its decommissioned sister ship. We're keeping our Arctic capability alive by harvesting the corpse of the ship we couldn't afford to maintain. USCGC, Healy, medium icebreaker, suffered major fires in 2020 and 2024. Meanwhile, Russia's Arctica-class icebreakers are the most powerful on Earth. 173 meters long, 60 megawatts of power, nearly twice as powerful as any planned US icebreakers. They can break through 9 feet of ice, and some Russian icebreakers are armed with caliber cruise missiles. The US replacement program? The Polar Security Cutter, over 60% over budget, now exceeding $5.1 billion for 3 ships, 5 or more years behind schedule. The first ship won't arrive until 2029 or 2030 at the earliest. General Gregory GIUK, Commander of US Northern Command, 2024. We're severely outnumbered, with limited freedom of maneuver in the Arctic. Let that sink in. The Commander of US Northern Command just admitted we're outnumbered. In the Arctic, where all of these strategic assets sit.
So here's the paradox. The United States is pouring billions into its Arctic base. Radar upgrades, power plants, dry dock expansions. But it can barely operate in the waters around that base. And here's what most people miss. The US already has nearly complete military access to Greenland. The 1951 Defense Agreement, still in force, valid as long as NATO exists. America doesn't need to buy Greenland to use Pituffik. It already has what it needs. The question is, for how long? Because while America debates buying an island it already has access to, 2 other powers have been building something far more ambitious. January 26, 2018. China's State Council releases its first ever Arctic policy white paper. In it, they declare China a near-Arctic state, quote, one of the continental states closest to the Arctic Circle. Now, geography is not a matter of opinion. China lies 1,500 kilometers from the Arctic Circle. That's roughly the distance from New York to Miami, from London to Rome. Calling China a near-Arctic state is like calling Mexico a near-Canadian state, like calling Egypt a near-Nordic nation. There's no legal basis for this designation. None. It doesn't exist in international law. But here's what it does. It establishes a framework, a claim, a foot in the door. And when Xi Jinping says China should become a polar great power by 2035, when the CCP identifies polar regions as China's new strategic frontiers, alongside the deep seabed and outer space, you start to understand. This isn't geography. It's ambition dressed up as geography. The Arctic, the ocean floor, space. That's China's frontier shopping list. The 2018 White Paper formally announced the Polar Silk Road, the Arctic extension of Belt and Road. The pitch is simple. As ice melts, the Northern Sea Route becomes viable. China wants to build the infrastructure to use it. Their flagship investment, the Yamal LNG project. Russia's Yamal Peninsula, deep in the Arctic. A $27 to $36 billion liquefied natural gas development. Chinese ownership, 29.9%. Chinese banks provided a $12 billion loan. That's roughly equivalent to financing 36% of Greenland's entire GDP for a single Russian gas project. China also holds 20% of Arctic LNG-2, a $21 billion follow-on project. When Western companies withdrew due to sanctions, China became the primary foreign investor. Why does China care about Arctic shipping? Shanghai to Rotterdam via the Northern Sea Route, 7,000 kilometers shorter than through Suez. A container ship recently completed the China-UK voyage in 20 days. Via Suez, 40 to 50 days. 2025, China completed 14 container ship voyages on the Northern Sea Route, up from 11 in 2024, 7 in 2023. The trend is clear. China isn't just investing, it's operating. Shuilong, Snow Dragon, converted from a Ukrainian cargo vessel in 1993, 9 Arctic expeditions. In 2017, it became the first Chinese ship to navigate all 3 major Arctic shipping routes. Shuilong 2, commissioned 2019, domestically built, features the world's first 2-way ice-breaking technology. It can operate for 60-day expeditions with a range of 37,000 kilometers. Now here's what happened in July 2025. US Coast Guard spotted Shuilong 2 just 290 nautical miles north of Alaska, 130 nautical miles inside the US extended continental shelf, an unprecedented incursion. Chinese vessels operating inside what America considers its waters. China also operates the Yellow River Station in Svalbard, Norway, established 2004, just 1,231 kilometers from the North Pole. Over 20 years, 250 scientific projects, 660 expedition members. Western analysts raise concerns. The China Research Institute of Radio Wave Propagation operates there, conducting ionospheric research with potential military applications. September 2024. China's Coast Guard entered the Arctic Ocean for the first time, during a 35-day joint patrol with Russia's FSB border service. China isn't just investing in the Arctic, it's patrolling. But here's what analysts noticed. The term Polar Silk Road has largely disappeared from official Chinese discourse since 2023. China's 10th anniversary Belt and Road White Paper mentioned neither the Arctic nor the Polar Silk Road. Most Chinese mineral projects in Greenland have been paused or cancelled before US pushback intensified. The interpretation? China may be pursuing Arctic access more quietly now, through Russia rather than direct Greenland investment. Or they're waiting, watching Greenland's independence process play out. Why fight for access to a Danish territory when you might be able to negotiate directly with an independent Greenland in a few years? But while China builds slowly, there's another power that's moved much faster and much more aggressively. Since 2010, Russia has reopened 50 previously closed Soviet-era military posts, refurbished 13 air bases, upgraded 10 radar stations, re-established 20 border outposts, over 100 infrastructure facilities across 6 major bases. The Arctic Trefoil, Alexandra Land, Franz Josef Land. Russia's northernmost permanent military installation, 80 degrees north latitude, just 160 miles from NATO territory in Svalbard. The facility is shaped like a trefoil, 14,000 square meters of enclosed area, housing 150 personnel for deployments up to 18 months. Adjacent, Nagurskoye Air Base. Runway extended to 3,500 meters, that's 11,500 feet, capable of receiving strategic bombers. Weapons deployed in the Russian Arctic. S-400 air defense systems at Novaya Zemlya and the Kola Peninsula. Range, up to 400 kilometers. K-300P Bastion P coastal defense systems. Can strike ships 200 miles offshore. Caliber cruise missiles on armed icebreakers. This isn't a research presence. This is a military fortress, and Russia controls the route that makes it all matter. 2024. Russia transported 37.9 million tons of cargo through the Northern Sea route, a record. Transit cargo, 3.07 million tons via 97 voyages, also records. Primary cargo, 54% crude oil, 21% bulk cargo, 11% containers. Destination, approximately 95% flows from Russia to China. Russia treats the Northern Sea route as an internal waterway. Requirements for foreign vessels, 45-day advance notification, Russian government permission, mandatory Russian pilots aboard. Rosatom, the state nuclear corporation, has held near total operational control since 2018. The container ship Istanbul Bridge completed the first China-UK voyage via the Northern Sea route in 20 days. Via Suez, 40 to 50 days. Cut the shipping time in half if you play by Russia's rules. October 2025. Russia and China signed an agreement to jointly develop the Northern Sea route as the Polar Silk Road. One analyst called it one of the most significant shifts in global trade architecture since the opening of the Suez Canal in 1869. The partnership isn't just commercial. July 2024. Chinese and Russian bombers conducted their first joint patrol in the Alaska Air Defense Identification Zone. September 2024. China's Coast Guard entered the Arctic Ocean for the first time, during a joint patrol with Russia's FSB border service. Since 2017, over 102 joint military exercises between Russia and China. When Western sanctions cut Russian access to Baker Hughes turbines for Arctic LNG-2, Russia pivoted to Chinese supplier Harbin Guanghan. Western companies withdrew. China stepped in. China is now the primary foreign investor in Russian Arctic projects. So Russia controls the route, China provides the capital. They're conducting joint military patrols, and the United States has 3 aging icebreakers and a 70-year-old defense agreement. But there's one more player in this story, and they're not taking it quietly. January 7th, 2025. The day after Trump's Mar-a-Lago press conference, King Frederick of Denmark did something that hadn't been done in over 500 years. He updated the royal coat of arms. The change? Prominent new Greenland symbols. The message? Unmistakable. Then Denmark opened its checkbook. January 2025. 14.6 billion Danish kroner, $2.04 billion, 3 new Arctic patrol vessels, 2 long-range surveillance drones, enhanced satellite capacity. October 2025. First package, 27.4 billion kroner, $4.26 billion, 2 additional Arctic vessels, maritime patrol aircraft, a new joint Arctic command headquarters in GIUK, a North Atlantic undersea cable, radar capability in East Greenland, icebreaker capacity. October 2025. Second package, 29 billion kroner, $4.5 billion, 16 additional F-35 fighters, bringing Denmark's total fleet to 43. Separately, in 2025, 58 billion kroner, $9.2 billion, for European-made air defense systems. Denmark's largest arms purchase ever. Total Arctic defense investment in 2025, over $20 billion, from a country of 6 million people.
September 2025.
Denmark held one of its largest ever military exercises in Greenland. The United States was excluded. December 2025. The Danish Defense Intelligence Service designated the United States as a potential security risk. Let that sink in. A NATO ally, 75 years of partnership, designated the United States as a potential security threat. This is unprecedented.
March 28, 2025.
Vice President J.D. Vance visited Greenland and Pituffik Space Base, the most senior U.S. official ever to visit. Denmark's Prime Minister Frederiksen called the visit not respectful. The aftermath? The Pituffik base commander, Colonel Susanna Myers, was relieved of duty. Her offense? Sending an email expressing concerns about the visit. Even U.S. military officers are uncomfortable with the pressure campaign. But while Denmark was spending billions to defend Greenland, the Greenlanders themselves had something to say. And in March 2025, they said it loud and clear. Prime Minister Mute Burup Egede called snap elections for March 11, 2025. His framing, this is a fateful choice for Greenland amid Trump's pressure. The question on the ballot wasn't just which party governs, it was how Greenland responds to superpower demands. One option, a new party called GIUK, formed specifically to advocate for joining the United States. Another option, the Nalarak Party, pushing for immediate independence, regardless of economic consequences. 56,000 people, about to decide their place between three superpowers.
The results. Democratic, the Social Liberal Party, won with 29.9%. Nalarak, pro-rapid independence, came second with 24.5%. Prime Minister Egede's party, Inuit Ataqatigiit, finished third. He lost power. And GIUK, the pro-Trump party, 305 votes, total, in the entire country. The new government, led by Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen, includes 4 parties, notably excluded the pro-rapid independence Nalarak. The interpretation: Greenland rejected both extremes, rapid independence and U.S. acquisition. They chose a middle path, their own path.
Election night. Prime Minister Nielsen addressed his country. We don't want to be Americans. No, we don't want to be Danes. We want to be Greenlanders. And we want our own independence in the future. Independence? Yes, but on Greenland's terms, at Greenland's pace. And then they put it in writing. All major Greenlandic political parties issued a joint statement. Greenland's future must be decided by the Greenlandic people. No other country can interfere in this. March 30th, 2025. Prime Minister Nielsen told Trump directly, the United States will not get Greenland.
But here's the impossible math Greenland now faces.
84% of Greenlanders support independence from Denmark, but only 45% want it if it would hurt living standards. 85% oppose becoming part of the United States. Only 6% support it. The economic reality. Denmark provides an annual block grant of approximately $640 million. That's 50 to 51% of Greenland's government revenue. Independence requires economic self-sufficiency. The fastest path to self-sufficiency? Mineral exploitation. The biggest ready investors? China. The trap. Greenland wants independence from Denmark, but achieving it might require dependence on China or the United States. They just said no to both. So Greenland said no. But what happens now? What if America can't accept that answer?
Here's what the experts are worried about.
The Seward Center, one of the most respected security analysis firms, put it bluntly.
By attempting to strong-arm Greenland, the US risks undermining Greenlandic cooperation altogether and potentially threatening a cornerstone of the broader US security architecture. What does that mean in practice? Greenland restricts or complicates US base operations. Cooperative intelligence sharing degrades. A future independent Greenland, and independence is coming, seeks alternative security partners. The very access America is fighting to secure evaporates. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen has been clear about where this leads. If the United States chooses to attack another NATO country militarily, then everything stops. That is, including NATO. Canada's former military commander warned a US takeover could be the shattering of NATO. And remember, Denmark has already designated the United States as a potential security risk. A NATO ally. 75 years of partnership. We're already in unprecedented territory. The question is how much further it goes. Greenland's business minister has already warned if Western investment fails to materialize, Greenland will have to turn to other partners, including China. An IEEE spectrum analysis described the nightmare scenario. For the United States, it would be a geostrategic nightmare if China opened a mine in a remote part of Greenland with a town, communication lines, harbor, and an airfield that could obviously be used for purposes other than resource extraction. A Chinese mining town with an airfield, 750 miles from the North Pole, in what America considers its strategic backyard. That's what's at stake. But here's what almost no one is talking about. CSIS analysts, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, argue that the status quo allows the United States to have its cake and eat it too. The current defense agreement gives the US wide military access. Denmark bears the administrative and financial costs. Cooperative engagement preserves the alliance. Thomas Crosby of the Royal Danish Defence College put it most directly. The United States will gain no advantage if its flag is flying in Nuuk versus the Greenlandic flag. They already enjoy all of the advantages they want. Let that sink in. The 1951 defense agreement remains in force as long as NATO exists. America already has near total military access. The radar is there, the satellite tracking is there, the early warning systems are there. The US doesn't gain anything by owning Greenland that it doesn't already have. But by demanding ownership instead of partnership, America risks losing the very access it spent 80 years building. And here's the real irony. The race isn't about flags. It's about rare earth processing facilities the West hasn't built, icebreaker fleets the US can't match, Russia-China agreements redrawing global trade routes. The US is fighting the wrong battle. For 160 years, America has tried to buy Greenland. And for 160 years, the answer has been no. But here's what almost no one is talking about. The US already has everything it needs. The base is there. The radar is there. The alliance is there. The 1951 agreement gives America nearly everything it wants without owning a single acre of ice. The threat isn't that someone else will buy Greenland. It's that by demanding ownership instead of partnership, the US might finally push too hard and lose the cooperation it spent 80 years building. Meanwhile, Russia and China aren't trying to buy anything. They're building. Icebreakers, processing plants, shipping routes, the infrastructure of Arctic control. The new Cold War won't be won by whoever plants a flag in Nuuk. It will be won by whoever controls the minerals that power the 21st century and the routes that move them. 56,000 Greenlanders just told the world they want to decide their own future. The question is whether Washington, Beijing, and Moscow will let them. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think happens next? Does America back off and keep the access it already has? Or does this escalate until the alliance fractures? Drop your prediction in the comments. And if you want to stay ahead of the new Cold War, the one being fought with icebreakers and processing plants instead of missiles, hit subscribe. We're covering the economics and geopolitics the mainstream won't touch.